The Steam Deck OLED released just 1.5 years after the debut of the Steam Deck LCD, and even though I thought I knew the story of the Steam Deck OLED, a recent dive into AMD's upcoming line of CPUs reveals that Valve potentially held back a significantly more powerful version of the Steam Deck OLED. According to prominent PC hardware leaker Moore's Law is Dead, Valve and AMD considered a Zen 4 based version of the Steam Deck OLED's APU. This information surfaced from documents containing a variety of AMD APU codenames, including those for next generation consoles that MLID gained access to. The Steam Deck OLED APU, Sephiroth, and the Deck LCD APU, Aerith, are both Zen 2, so a jump to Zen 4 would have been significant, bringing in not only improvements in performance and efficiency, but also potentially in feature set if it meant an upgraded RDNA as well, either RDNA 3 or RDNA 3.5. With regard to performance, games that currently struggle to hit a stable 30 FPS on the Steam Deck might have been able to flirt with 40 or maybe even higher more consistently. This improved baseline could also mean better ability to take advantage of FSR3 frame generation. Despite what could have been though, I suspect that ultimately Valve's decision to stick with the refined Zen 2 based chip was the right call in the long run. Valve has always positioned the Steam Deck as a more streamlined PC experience, one that bears some resemblance to the console experience. A core tenet of the console experience is a fixed hardware target for devs, and by maintaining relative performance parity between the LCD and OLED models, Valve ensured that developers have a consistent target to optimize for. For consumers, this prevents scenarios where devs might ignore the millions of original Steam Deck owners in favor of a much more powerful, newer model. There are also practical economic reasons for Valve going this route. Sticking with the Zen 2 was almost certainly cheaper for Valve, allowing them to maintain the same price points for the Steam Deck OLED as the original LCD model. I'm sure Valve was reticent to raise prices or just maintain too many models at the same time. Interestingly, other handhelds on the market have since adopted Zen 4 chips, and that is a helpful comparison point because although they often do showcase impressive high-end performance, many have struggled to achieve the same power efficiency as Steam Deck at lower wattages. This has resulted in less consistent battery life in those portable scenarios, with Asus having to make it up with a magical 80 watt-hour battery in the ROG Ally X. Valve's decision to refine their Zen 2 APU for the OLED model, coupled with the OLED screen efficiency, illustrates that they clearly wanted to prioritize battery life across the entire power curve, and that is something that a hypothetical Zen 4 Steam Deck would have had to overcome with dedicated optimization. So although the concept of a Zen 4 Steam Deck is certainly fascinating, I think Valve's decision was more measured. But what do you think? Was Valve right to hold back on Zen 4 for the Steam Deck OLED, or do you wish that they'd pushed through the boundaries for a more powerful handheld? Let me know in the comments. For what it's worth, that Zen 4 Steam Deck OLED APU was not the biggest news from that video. Tom from Moore's Law is Dead also detailed the APU that he reports is targeted for a PS6 called Orion, and an APU codenamed Canis that appears to be for the long-awaited PlayStation handheld. Tom suggests that the PS6 won't be an astronomical leap in pure raster performance, perhaps 3 times that of a PS5, with ray tracing performance looking more like a 6 to 10-fold increase. In terms of raw power, PS6 is targeting 160 watts total board power compared to PS5's 200 plus. PS6's modest jump in performance does lead Tom to believe that Sony are going to be targeting a more economical price point. On that note, the PlayStation handheld should be powered by another leaked APU in Canis, as I mentioned, and it too is not being considered a powerhouse at this point. Tom says that it should beat the Xbox Ally X in terms of performance, but with a likely release date of 2027 or early 2028, that puts it more than 2 years after the scheduled release date of the Ally X. Canis is reported to support 4 Zen 6C cores and 12 to 20 RDNA 5 compute units. With Canis, AMD and Sony are targeting 15 watt total board power, making it comparable to the overall power draw of devices like the Steam Deck. The estimated rasterization performance is about half that of PS5, with ray tracing expected to be higher than that. Given that, it seems comparable, perhaps even stronger than the Xbox Series S. As for what this handheld would play, Tom indicates that it will be compatible with games from PS4 and PS5 generations with no word on PS3. Is this something you would consider picking up in a couple years? Let me know in the comments. All right, that is enough of what Sony's working on in the future. I have to update you on what Valve is dealing with right now. That's right, it's time to circle back to that whole Steam censorship drama since there have been some updates. If you remember, Valve and Itch.io were both pretty clear not safe for work games were getting the boot because credit card companies were putting pressure on these stores. Since then, we have a new statement from MasterCard. This statement reads, MasterCard has not evaluated any game or required restrictions of any activity on game creators' sites and platforms contrary to media reports and allegations. Our payment network follows standards based on the rule of law. Put simply, we allow all lawful purchases on our network. At the same time, we require merchants to have appropriate controls to ensure MasterCard cards cannot be used for unlawful purchases, including illegal adult content. This statement doesn't make any sense to me, considering many of the games that were removed are in fact legal, at least in the United States, and this contradicts basically everything we've heard up until this point. But then Valve chimed in and provided a statement to PC Gamer saying, quote, MasterCard did not communicate with Valve directly despite our request to do so. MasterCard communicated with payment processors and their acquiring banks. Payment processors communicated this with Valve, and we replied by outlining Steam's policy since 2018 of attempting to distribute games that are legal for distribution. Payment processors rejected this and specifically cited MasterCard's Rule 5.12.7 and risk to the MasterCard brand, end quote. So MasterCard is trying to pass the buck, saying they have nothing to do with this, but payment processors are citing MasterCard's own rule for the pressure that they in turn are applying to Valve and Itch.io. Not only that, but MasterCard essentially rejected working with Valve directly altogether, and given their public statement, it kind of seems like they wanted to do that in order to maintain this thin veil of plausible deniability. But what is Rule 5.12.7? Well, it states that, quote, a merchant must not submit to its acquirer and a customer must not submit to the interchange system any transaction that is illegal or in the sole discretion of the corporation may damage the goodwill of the corporation. To be clear, the corporation in question here is MasterCard, and they go on to say that this includes, quote, the sale of a product or service, including an image which is patently offensive and lacks serious artistic value, end quote. This is an incredibly broad rule and further points to overreach on the part of MasterCard to have near carte blanche status over what can be sold around the world, all while shedding any accountability. So I do got to give a shout out to PC Gamer for covering this in detail, and I do echo their sentiment that MasterCard releasing a statement at all indicates that they are feeling the pressure and that the voices of people buying games on Steam are being heard, so let's keep it up. Now, one aside is that GOG.com have released a free bundle in protest of games being removed from stores, and this bundle is called Freedom to Buy Games. To be clear, this is a not safe for work bundle that includes adult-themed games like Honey Pop, which is like Bejeweled, but with boobs, or Sapphire Safari, which is like Pokemon Snap, but with boobs. Yes, I had to research this topic to bring you an informed overview, so you're welcome. To be clear, the games in this bundle are not ones that were removed from Steam. In that way, this isn't necessarily an indictment of Valve or Itch.io for removing games, but instead a show of solidarity with Valve and Itch.io in a public statement of protest against these payment processors. For what it's worth, I also want to call out a little bit of misinformation I've seen with people saying that they're not able to get their money back if they purchased one of these games on Steam and they were removed. From what I understand, the games were delisted from the store, not revoked from your library. You should still have access to your games for what it's worth, but definitely contact Steam for a refund if you don't. Don't let Valve off the hook for that. In any case, I will keep you updated on all of this as the story continues to develop. While Valve has been dealing with these external pressures, let's talk about what they've been internally working on. Amidst so-called info droughts of the reported Half-Life 3, a recent Counter-Strike 2 update has revealed what data miners are calling the Great Valve Refactoring. It's a massive Source 2 engine overhaul that seems to come with some exciting new data. This data was evaluated in a pair of new videos from prominent Valve data miners, Tyler McVicker and Gabe Fowler. This data dump has undeniable references to HLX, the code name for what is all but certain to be Half-Life 3. More importantly though, Tyler and Gabe Fowler both conclude that the game is now in late stages of development. Both videos reference very extensive efforts on Valve's part to streamline dev tools like Hammer, citing tutorial-like documentation and plain English explanations. This level of user-friendliness and finalization of tools is typically a very late-stage process in game development since features need to be stable before being documented for broader use, even by new internal employees. Both sources also point to a major refactoring that includes significant performance improvements like the configurable lightweight body system for optimizing physics and a general emphasis on refining existing complex systems like AI, environments, and damage. This focus on polish rather than the foundational feature development indicates that content is largely locked down. Tyler and Gabe Follower also discuss features to HLX that we hadn't known about yet, like much smarter NPC reactions, a collision system similar to GTA 4 and GTA 5 that enables characters to be physically knocked down, pushed, and even get back up. This level of character interaction is accompanied, of course, by the robust physics system that includes new material properties like density, elasticity, plasticity, alongside detailed surface behaviors for burning, electrical conductivity, and sound reflection. You know, Gabe recently said that he thinks Half-Life as a series represents a promise to customers of never before seen innovation in gameplay, and he said that they don't want to make another Half-Life unless they can clear that high bar. Well, it seems like HLX may just be that game. Moving on from future games to current updates, Valve recently published a couple big updates. The first is a new Steam beta client update that makes library customization a bit more straightforward. The big news here is that games now have their own customization tab in the properties menu. Previously, if you wanted to change game artwork, it wasn't always obvious how to do it, with many people opting for things like the Steam Grid DB Decky plugin. On top of that, they've added a special text box for custom sort titles. This means you can give a custom name purely for how you want it to sort in your library without actually changing the display title. As someone who likes to keep things organized, I immediately worried that this would feed my inner OCD, especially with non-Steam games and ROMs. Imagine going through Legend of Zelda and making sure that it says Legend of Zelda, just to make sure it gets sorted correctly. Nonetheless, this is a good update that genuinely makes personalizing our Steam Deck experience more accessible, so good on Valve. Shifting gears from organizing our libraries to filling them, Valve also rolled out some much needed upgrades to the Steam trailer player. The new interface is much cleaner and more responsive. It adapts the video to whatever device you're on, whether desktop, phone, or of course the Steam Deck. The biggest practical improvements for us are probably the preview images when you're scrubbing through a timeline, plus seeking and transitioning to full screen should be way faster and smoother now thanks to some of the underlying video tech changes. Valve also mentions they re-encoded around 400,000 video files to make this happen, generating different sizes for smarter bandwidth usage. So yes, it seems that Valve has caught up to 2010's technology. Valve do point out that some older videos are still lower resolution owing to the fact that they were unable to find the originals. Honestly, even with some minor gripes, this is a huge quality of life update. The old trailer was indeed cheeks, so such a big improvement here is very welcome. Speaking of things that are welcome, the Steam Deck's impact continues to be felt in the Steam hardware survey, and the latest numbers for July 2025 show a significant milestone for Linux gaming, with Linux market share on Steam now just shy of 3% at 2.89. This continued rise, shown here via gamingonlinux.com Steam Tracker charts, certainly shows that the Steam Deck LCD and OLED were a catalyst in this sustained upward trend. Even with that though, the data seems to suggest that the expansion isn't just deck driven. The breakdown of Linux distributions on Steam indicate that more users are actively trying and adopting a wider variety of distros for PC gaming rather than just sticking to Valve's official Steam OS. This points to a broader interest and confidence in Linux as a viable and increasingly robust platform for playing PC games. To that point, I mentioned the growth that Bazite has had in a previous video, and here we see again that Bazite is gaining nearly another 1% of Linux market share. What do you make of all this? What is your favorite Linux distro for gaming? Now, Valve did reach another pretty big milestone for the Steam Deck, over 20,000 verified and playable titles. That is a massive number, and it clearly shows Valve is pushing hard to get the Steam library working on their handheld. Now, from my experience, although that number does sound awesome, the reality of the Deck verified system is that it has been pretty inconsistent. I'm not going to belabor the point since I've talked about this so much in the past, but I've definitely run into games like Spider-Man 2, which should absolutely not be considered verified. But here's the thing, those are my personal standards. Steam's user surveys where players vote on verified status likely feeds into Valve's official decision. Perhaps for many, simply having the game run on a handheld is a win, and this willingness to play despite performance nitpicks could be driving these numbers up. Ultimately, if Valve is meeting the expectations of a large portion of their user base, I guess that's what counts for customer satisfaction, and personally, I'm just happy to otherwise ignore Valve's official badges. Next, let's celebrate a game that just hit their own massive milestone on Steam Deck charts. As reported by Steam Deck HQ, Peak shot all the way up to the top 5 most played games last week. I'll be honest, I haven't actually played Peak yet. I've been watching it, I've been reading reviews, I went ahead and grabbed copies for myself and the whole Nerd Nest crew, but from what I can tell, this game just sounds like pure chaotic fun with friends. There's proximity chat, so you can hear your buddies' screams get quieter and quieter as they plummet off the cliffs. The daily procedurally generated maps also lend themselves to a just one more try kind of vibe, but yeah, it runs great, it's plain dumb fun, and you can buy it for under $10. Huge congratulations to the Peak team for making it to the top of the mountain on the Steam Deck. Next up, let's talk a little homebrew because the unofficial lossless scale frame generation for Linux project has just hit its 1.0.0 release. As you might recall, an enterprising developer recently made lossless scaling compatible for Linux, and this update makes it even simpler to use. The big headline here is a brand new GUI making everything much more straightforward. This 1.0 release also brings support for the latest frame gen model, LSFG 3.1, plus a lighter performance mode for even more options. Additionally, everything is now managed from one single config file, making it super tidy. The developer, Pancake, still love that name, has provided proper packages for most Linux distros, so Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch Linux, which also means SteamOS, and even a Flatpak version if you prefer that route. It should be noted, however, that the Flatpak does not yet have the GUI, so bit of a bummer, but still that's progress, right? Looking ahead, Pancake has some cool stuff planned too. We might see dual GPU support down the line, though apparently it won't be quite as good as on Windows due to some Linux and Vulkan quirks. They're also eyeing performance improvements and more quality of life features like hotkeys to activate FrameGen. This is just the latest big step for getting FrameGen more smoothly integrated into our Linux gaming experience, especially on the Steam Deck. Big shout out to Pancake and everyone involved for making this possible. Sticking with community tools and homebrew, let's squeeze in a quick update on another fantastic project. This time it's nonsteamlaunchers, or NSL, which just dropped its 4.2.3 release. This update brings some sweet quality of life improvements, especially for organizing your non-Steam games. They've added real-time collections, so all your games from different launchers, whether it's Epic, GOG, or even the newly supported NVIDIA GeForce Now Linux games, are now neatly going to be sorted into collections for those stores in your Steam library. You can even create individual shortcuts for your favorited GeForce Now native Linux titles, which is awesome for custom controller layouts and for artwork. They've also added support for cloudypad.gg for those of you that are streaming your games. Plus, there are a bunch of fixes for the battle.net scanner. And just a heads up, the Decky Loader plugin version of NSL is temporarily broken due to a recent Decky update, but a fix is on the way, so big props to Mororoy for constantly improving non-Steam launchers. In other news, the main developer behind the popular PlayStation 1 emulator, DuckStation, recently caused a bit of a stir by threatening to remove Linux support entirely. Apparently, they're fed up with headaches from the unofficial Arch Linux packages and users complaining to them instead of to the package maintainers. The DuckStation developer clarified that Linux support isn't being removed immediately. They've put in a request to get the problematic packages taken down, and if that happens, then it's back to business as usual, and if not, well, they might just walk away. We saw a somewhat similar situation just a couple weeks ago with the unofficial lossless scaling for Linux project, where a Decky plugin was released against the developer Pancake's wishes. That led to incorrect recommendations and a bit of a public spat, though thankfully that one now seems to be ironed out with better communication since. Hopefully, cooler heads will prevail here too with DuckStation. From software squabbles to handheld happenings, let's pivot to the Lenovo Legion Go 2, which reportedly is already getting Linux support. According to Phoronix, Linux kernel driver activity has officially begun for the Legion Go 2, and it's being done by a Valve developer. Derek Clark recently submitted a patch for Legion Go's controller input. It turns out a firmware update for the original Legion Go gave its detachable controllers the exact same product ID that the upcoming Legion Go 2's controllers will use. This means that essential controller support is being baked into the Linux kernel in advance of the new device's release. This is great news, especially considering the Legion Go 2 is expected to pack serious punch with the AMD Ryzen Z2 Extreme SoC and a 144Hz OLED VRR display. I know for me, I'm likely to install Linux immediately on the Legion Go 2, so it's good to see this sort of support on day zero. For all the exciting news about the Go 2, however, I do have one fear, and that is pricing. Handhelds across the board seem to be getting more expensive. We've already seen links for the Xbox ROG Ally X suggesting a price around €899, and for budget devices, a new executive order in the US is threatening to remove an import duty-free loophole, potentially hiking prices even further. Let's hope the Legion Go 2 manages to hit a sweet spot without breaking the bank. That's going to do it for this week, folks. I'm working on a 2025 games for Steam Deck video, so definitely let me know what you've been playing in the comments. I hope you're having a wonderful week. Deck Gang out. Goodbye.